Welcome to this week's edition of Wednesday Web Chat. I am Carl Lewis, your host from Vision 33, and today our special guest is Russ Reiniger from Concur. Russ, welcome to Wednesday Web Chat. Nice to have you here and nice to see Concur on our presentation list.
Carl, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's nice to join you guys this morning. My name is Russ Reiniger. I'm an advisor sales executive with Concur. So I work specifically with our technology partners such as Vision 33 and their clients when they want to evaluate Concur and our overall spend management platform. My colleague Ryan Momertz is out there as well. I know he's stuck on mute at the moment, but he's our business development manager that manages the relationship with Vision 33 as well. So with that, I will jump right into it. I know you're all excited to hear about expense reports today. But you know, in my role, I'm fortunate that I get to chat with businesses all around the country, right? And when we start those conversations, it's usually at a high level about what they're really trying to achieve as an organization, right? And not surprising, there's some consistent themes here, right? So what I generally hear from folks, you know, is that they're trying to increase revenue growth. They're trying to improve operating efficiency. They're trying to develop new products or services. They're trying to attract and retain new talent, right, which is a constant battle as well, and generally trying to enter some new markets or distribution channels. So what we're finding as a trend, right, is most businesses are turning towards technology to help them achieve a lot of these goals, right? Part of that is spend management, right? So one of the key processes that is in place, right, is around spend management. And while it may not be the most exciting topic, right, it can have a lasting impact on their bottom line and really help them achieve those overarching goals that they have as a business, right? So let's take a look and sort of break down where most companies are in terms